For decades, the silence was louder than any confession. It lived in pauses during interviews, in half-smiles, in stories that were never finished. Anthony Quinn, a man who wore 1,000 faces on screen, carried one truth he rarely touched. And at the center of it stood John Wayne, America's towering symbol of strength, certainty, and myth. What happens when the legend you worked beside isn't quite the legend the world believes? And why did it take so long for Anthony Quinn to finally speak? Picture a dimly lit room late at night, the kind where memories creep in uninvited. Quinn sits alone, older now, his voice roughened by time, his eyes still sharp. On the wall, framed posters from films that shaped generations. He stares at one image longer than the rest. A Western set, dust in the air, two men standing side by side. One became a symbol, the other became a question mark. They met in an era when Hollywood was carving heroes out of celluloid. John Wayne arrived on set like a force of nature, confident, commanding, already aware of the shadow he cast. Anthony Quinn, equally talented but far less celebrated, watched closely, not with envy, but with curiosity. How does one man become larger than life while another must fight for depth, for complexity, for humanity? On set, the cameras loved Wayne. He knew his angles, his posture, his silence. Between takes, the myth softened, just slightly. Quinn noticed it first. The jokes that fell flat, the moments of uncertainty quickly hidden behind bravado. It wasn't disappointment Quinn felt, it was realization. Heroes, he learned, are carefully constructed. There was tension, subtle but persistent. Not open conflict, Hollywood rarely allowed that, but a quiet competition. Wayne represented certainty, America's idealized reflection. Quinn represented something messier. An immigrant, a man of contradictions, a performer who refused to flatten himself into a symbol. And perhaps that difference unsettled them both. Years passed. Careers diverged and overlapped. Wayne became untouchable, a monument in motion pictures. Quinn traveled a harder road, collecting roles that demanded pain, introspection, and moral ambiguity. And still, he said nothing. Why speak when the world prefers its legends unchallenged? But silence has a cost. In private conversations, Quinn would hint at moments that stayed with him. A look exchanged after a take. A line rewritten to preserve an image. A quiet dismissal when questions grew too deep. Was Wayne protecting his legacy, or was Hollywood protecting it for him? Near the end of his life, Quinn's tone changed. Not bitter, not angry, just honest. He spoke of admiration first, because it was real. Wayne had presence. He understood the power of myth better than anyone. But then came the pause, the long breath before the truth. He wasn't the man people thought he was. Quinn would say, carefully, not cruelly, just truthfully. He described a man shaped by expectation, trapped inside an image he could never fully escape. A man who carried his own fears behind the swagger. A man who sometimes confused strength with certainty. And in that admission, Quinn revealed something else, empathy. Because he, too, knew what it meant to be misunderstood. One story resurfaced again and again. A quiet moment after filming wrapped. The crew had left. The dust had settled. Wayne lingered, staring out at the horizon. No audience left to impress. Quinn stood nearby, saying nothing. For a second, the myth slipped. And in that silence, two actors stood exposed, not as symbols, but as men. Did Wayne know Quinn saw him? Did that moment matter more than any scene they filmed? When Quinn finally spoke publicly, it wasn't to tear down a legend. It was to reclaim nuance, to remind us that icons are human, and humanity is never simple. The reaction was divided. Some called it betrayal. Others called it overdue honesty. But Quinn seemed unbothered. He had waited long enough to be misunderstood. What does it mean to tell the truth when the world prefers a story? What responsibility do we have to legends to preserve them, or to humanize them? Quinn didn't offer answers. He offered reflection. And in doing so, he challenged us to look closer at the myths we inherit. In the end, this wasn't just about John Wayne, it was about the cost of silence, the weight of image, and the courage it takes to speak when the applause has faded. Anthony Quinn didn't break his silence to rewrite history. He did it to complete it. And as the screen fades to black, one question lingers in the quiet. How many other truths remain unspoken, waiting for someone brave enough or tired enough to finally let them go?